me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I want to give notice that we did have an executive session this evening to discuss legal issues and personnel issues. Tonight, again, in the third meeting, we're going to start with some presentations. The first presentation is from FHI Studios. Adam Texa is going to give us the trends and conditions.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And there we go. Excellent. All right. Go to the start here. Oh. So thank you very much, Commissioners, for the opportunity to give this abridged version of the existing conditions and trends report. The full presentation is on the Radnor2035.com website, so everybody can go and see that, as well as a full slide deck if you want to look at the slides in more details. Just as a little bit of reminder, my name is Adam Texa. I'm the project manager for FHI Studio. I'm here representing my team. We are the comprehensive plan consultants that have been hired by the Township. Today I'm going to give you an overview of sort of what does Radnor look like in 2020. Some people may be curious why 2020 and not 2024. Well, that's when the census data we've got is sort of best represented. I'm going to try to talk about some of the key changes that have happened since 2000. Remember, your last comprehensive plan was done in 2003. And then I'm going to focus on some mobility and housing topics that our steering committee thought you all would be particularly interested in. When I presented this to the steering committee, they suggested that I throw out this idea of some myths. They wanted me to focus on these ideas, these things that maybe challenge preconceived notions that you have about Radnor. I was joking about the show Mythbusters. If anybody's seen it, I'm a little bit of a nerd and I like these kind of things. And what they always do is they sort of have these movies things and then they say, is it true or not? Is it busted or is it confirmed? So I'm going to use that just as a little bit of a foil here to talk about some of the things that you may not otherwise know about Radnor. So I'm going to start with the demographic conditions and trends. So as you may know, there are about 33,000 people who are living in Radnor, and they are living in about 10,000 households. However, about 7,500 people are living in group quarters. This is what the census calls dormitories. 1 in 4 residents are college-age students, and 1 in 5 are under the age of 18. About 6% of residents are over the age of 75. One thing that's important to note here is the census counts people who basically live more than half the year in an area as living in that area as residents. So all of those college students are counted in your census data. However, we really focus on household data, and as you can see in the dormitories and the group quarters here, students aren't counted within the household data. So it's a way of us to sort of focus on sort of full-time, year-round residents, although we will be talking a little bit about the college-age population. So when you look at households, only about 27% of households in Radnor are married with children under the age of 18. There's about another 29% who are married without children under 18. And a full 40% of households in Radnor are non-family households. So for some people, this may sort of bust the myth, this idea that most households in Radnor are families with children. As you might expect, Radnor is a very well-educated community. About 76% of residents hold a bachelor degree. These are people over the age of 18. The median household income is $150,000. The household earnings are above above $200,000 is 40%. So that's a sizable percentage of people who basically max out. The $200,000 is the most that the census tracks in terms of household income. However, it is notable that about 18% of all households are earning under $75,000. So that's half of your median household income. Radnor has a small but significant foreign-born population at about 14%. 44% of those foreign-born people immigrate from Asia, and about 31% from Europe. However, one of the key statistics that we look at when we look at foreign-born population is what percentage of the population does not speak English very well. It's a very low percentage in your community, indicating that these are educated people moving into your community and they're well integrated into the larger sort of Radnor society. Many would expect, there was a big population growth in Radnor between 1960 and 1970 as the community was building out. And that there has been real steady increases ever since then, but no significant sort of booms since about the 1960s and 1970s. However, that doesn't mean that things haven't changed. So over the past 20 years, there's been significant shifts in the makeup of your age demographics. So the boomers, sort of that generation in that cohort, has really moved over the past 20 years into that sort of near retirement or retirement age. And as a result, you've seen real increases in the number of people in your community who are between the ages of 55 and 75. At the same time, you've actually seen decreases in those sort of working age population people, which are really your millennials, Gen Xers, and maybe a touch of your Gen Zers. My guess is that those increases in the sort of 15 to 19-year-old age group are representative a little bit of changing policies in the universities or the institutions in your communities, accepting more people. But it is noticeable that you have seen an uptick in that sort of age group between 10 and 24, or excuse me, 10 and 19. Another thing that has happened in Radnor over the past 20 years is that there's been a significant increase in the number of people or number of households making more than $200,000, and subsequent decreases across all other income categories, except for those making between $100,000 and $150,000. One thing to note here is that the census doesn't adjust these income categories for inflation. However, when you look at, I'll show you some data later, when you look at the income trends, these shifts can't be solely attributed to inflation. As a result of these changes in household income, you've seen a very significant change in the sort of composition of your community. So one of the things that you'll note here is between 2000 and 2020, there's been a significant increase in the proportion of your community that is earning more than $200,000 a year. That has really come in a decrease in basically all the other categories, but it is worth noting that there's been a somewhat substantial decrease in the number of households making less than $25,000 a year. So this does confirm this idea that Radnor has gotten wealthier over the past 20 years. So when we look at changes in median income, one way we can benchmark this to tell how quickly are you going relative to your peers is to look at median income relative to the state and Delaware County. And as this diagram shows, that in 2000, there was about a $52,000 difference between the median income in Pennsylvania and the median income in Radnor. In 2020, that number had grown to $70,000. And these numbers are adjusted to 2020 dollars. So these are real income increases that have happened over that period of time. So this is confirming this sort of idea that Radnor is outpacing other communities when it comes to income growth. The racial composition of Radnor has also become more diverse over time. As you can see here, between 2000 and 2020, there's been increases in basically all the demographic groups that the census tracks. Most significantly, a growth in those who identify as two or more races, as well as those who identify as Asian alone. So this is really confirming the idea that Radnor is growing more diverse and is sort of trending that way over the past 20 years. One of the things that you can also see happening at Radnor is shift in household size. So what this graph shows here are basically the number of households that were 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-person households in 2000, 2010, and 2020. And what you can see is there's been a substantial decrease in the number of one-person households over the past 20 years, and modest increases in the number of 3, and 4, and 5-person households in the community. And so that sort of brings up this topic of housing, which is something that I think the steering committee really wanted me to present to all of you and get your eyes on, as it would be. So I'm not going to go into these in a lot of depth, but there's some big key regional trends that are impacting housing that are worth paying attention to. The first one is a shift to central places. This is this idea that people are increasingly wanting to live in sort of urban areas. And one of the myths out there is that this means downtown areas. This means Center City, Philadelphia, right, in big high-rise buildings. That's not the case. Pew does some research on this, and what they basically found is only a very small percentage of millennials and boomers really see themselves as downtowners, which would be that sort of Center City group. A bigger percentage of them see themselves as urbanites. And so those are people who are looking to live in places like Wayne, in Ardmore, sort of smaller, walkable areas that may still be within a larger suburban context. There's a large conversation going on right now around missing middle housing. So this is a topic that you can read a lot about, and I'm sure many of you know about, but it's this idea for a number of decades in this country, we've been building single-family homes and large apartment buildings, 100, 200-unit apartment buildings. And we haven't been building a lot of 3 to 20-unit apartment buildings that fit more within a sort of single-family neighborhood context. And so there's an argument that one of the ways that we can address some of the housing issues in this country is through this missing middle housing product. Millennials and boomers are really the ones driving the housing market right now. There has been a real increase in what we call sort of lifelong renters, and that's a byproduct of a lot of factors which we can get into. Age-targeted luxury development is something that's really starting to come online. So this is no longer just like retirement communities, but really high-end retirement communities. Work from home is obviously something that we're all sort of trying to figure out and understand how it's going to progress in the future. And then there's this regional affordable housing crisis that I'm going to talk a little bit about. For those of you who want to learn a little bit more about this, the county has put out a housing report that's excellent as part of their long-range comprehensive planning, where they discuss some of these topics in more detail. So in terms of household and tenure, one thing that may surprise people is that Radnor is a community where about 35% of households, about 1 in 3 households, rent. That's higher than Lower Merion Township, Haverford Township, and it's actually higher than the county as a whole. So that may sort of dispel a myth out there that Radnor is a place where everybody owns a home. One thing to pay attention to is there is some differences between owner-occupied housing and renter-occupied housing. One of the most significant being that owner-occupied housing tends to have more people in it. There tend to be larger households than renter-occupied households. And one thing that we've seen over the past 10 years is that the size of owner-occupied housing has grown more than the size of renter-occupied housing. And these are all sort of average numbers here. There has been some significant changes in household composition. So over the past 10 years, you've seen an increase in the number of married couple family households and decreases in the number of no spouse family households, households living alone, and non-family households. And I won't get into all of this in significant detail, but I think one thing to point out is that of those non-family households, that loss in non-family households that you've got, a disproportionate share have come from households where the primary household owner is 65 years or older, or where they're between the ages of 15 and 34. Okay, so those younger and older groups are sort of leaving at greater rates than what you might think of as your working age or family age households. So that does sort of confirm this idea that we heard a little bit in the survey that Radnor is losing younger and older singles at higher rates than other groups. In terms of tenure, one thing to also be paying attention to is that married couple families who rent is growing. So have you actually seen an increase of 580 households that are married couples? These are people without children who are renting. And the share of those people went from being 21% of all renters to 40% of all renters, which I think really starts to dispel this myth that families don't rent, that these are only singles who are out renting some of your units. Another thing that we looked at is how long people have been living in their homes. So the Census Bureau and the IRS doesn't report any data about how long somebody's lived in their community. It's a very big gap in the data. What they do ask is how long you've been living in your home. So we have to take a little bit with a little bit of grain of salt, recognizing that people do move within Radnor from home to home. However, one thing that you can see from this data is that about 43% of the households in Radnor have moved within the last 6 years. They moved into their home within the last 6 years. If we also think about when your last comprehensive plan was done about 20 years ago, you start to see that a vast majority of households have moved homes, either moved into the community or moved homes within the community since your last comprehensive plan, suggesting that things have changed significantly over the past 20 years. So this is sort of busting a little bit of this idea that everybody has lived in Radnor forever, grown up here, lived here, gonna stay here forever. I do want to talk a little bit about affordable housing. One thing to really be paying attention to is that there is a national affordable housing crisis. So this is some data that DVRPC has been reporting on, and if you go onto their website, they've written a number of really great reports on this. But one way of tracking affordability is to measure the median sale price to the median income of households. So this is nationally median sale price to median income. And as you can see, there's been a real spike in the last several years, indicating that housing costs is increasing faster than income is. Within the greater Philadelphia area, we've seen significant increases in the asking price for rent. And housing prices in Radnor themselves have significantly changed. So between 2000 and 2020, one of the things that we're seeing is a significant increase in the number of homes that are valued at over $1 million, and significant decreases in the number of homes that are valued at under $250,000. Again, the census doesn't adjust these for inflation, but nonetheless, I think it's pretty clear that there's some changes that are happening that go beyond inflation. And we can look at that by benchmarking Radnor against Pennsylvania and Delaware County. So Radnor has experienced a 57% increase in the cost of housing for homeowners with a mortgage over the past 20 years. And in 2000, there was about a $1,100 difference between sort of the median monthly owner costs in Radnor and that in Pennsylvania. And that has increased to $1,800, almost $1,900 in 2020. And these are benchmarked to 2020 dollars. Rental costs, one of the things that the census reports is a little bit of information about how much it costs to rent in Radnor. One of the things to pay attention to here is that in order to rent a one bedroom, sort of the median rental cost in Radnor, a household would need to make about $65,000. In order to rent a 3-bedroom unit at sort of the median price, we're talking about needing to earn almost $100,000 a year in order to afford that rent. A vast majority of the rental units are between $1,000 and $2,000, which is a strong indication that there's at least some supply of affordable housing within the community. However, within Radnor, the housing cost to income ratio has increased. One thing to pay attention to, though, here is that it does seem that there was sort of a spike in 2010 that sort of pulled back a little bit over the past 10 years. And so there is some indication that the sort of high cost of housing that we were experiencing around the financial crisis is ameliorating a little bit. But this does confirm that housing is getting more expensive relative to incomes in Radnor. One thing that the census reports is something called cost burden. So a household is considered cost burden when they're spending more than 30% of their income on household costs. That's rent, utilities, HOA fees, the whole 9 yards. And one of the things that we can see here is that even households with a mortgage are experiencing higher costs, or there are more households than there were in 2000. But once again, we're seeing a little bit of that trend of maybe 2010 was a little bit of a peak, and we're pulling back from that peak right now. This information also shows that, yes, people are more cost burdened than they were in 2000. But it does sort of bust this idea that things have gotten worse over the past 10 years. There's some indication that things have actually gotten a little bit better over the past 10 years. But it also sort of confirms this idea that renters are more likely to be cost burdened, something that is very typical in a lot of communities. I think it is important to pay attention here that more than half of renters are considered cost burdened in 2020. Radnor is not a community that is particularly accessible to low and moderate income households. So HUD has a definition of a low and moderate income household. A low income household is a household making less than 80% of area median income, and a moderate income household is a household making between 80 and 120% of area median income. They use the area that is the Philadelphia, Camden, Wilmington sort of area as the median to establish what that median income is. But in Radnor right now, there are only about 260 homes that could be afforded by somebody who's making 80% of AMI, and only about 626 homes that could be afforded by somebody making 120% of AMI. So this is sort of confirming the idea that low and moderate income residents have a hard time finding housing in Radnor. The final issue around housing that I'm not going to be able to answer, and I don't think we're going to have a final answer on for probably another 3 or 4 years here, is what the work from home impacts are. In 2020, 21% of workers said they worked from home, which was an increase of 7% since 2010. But I do want to sort of point a little bit of your attention to some reporting done by the New York Times that indicates that exactly the type of workers who are in Radnor, so these are more educated workers, are the ones that are most likely to be fully remote and to work from home at least some of the time in some sort of hybrid condition, which indicates that over the next several years, it is likely that you continue to have a significant population that works from home at least some of the time. Regarding mobility issues, one of the things that we find really interesting is between 2010 and 2020, there has been this increase in people who work from home, and they seem to almost exclusively come from the people who drove to work alone. So that has real impacts on your questions around traffic and the impact that housing might have on your overall roadway conditions. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out over time. By the way, I wouldn't want to drive into Philadelphia every day, so I think this makes some sense given that about 25% of your workers commute into Philadelphia for work. In terms of traffic, it may come a little bit of a surprise to people that overall traffic volumes are down over the past 20 years. This is DOT data, and when I say traffic, I actually mean number of cars passing through the community. This is reported in a value called average annual daily traffic volumes. And so there are just, quite frankly, fewer cars moving through Radnor on some of these key segments that we've identified, including Route 30, Conestoga Road, Bryn Mawr Avenue, and Spring Mill Road. And there have been some significant decreases. So this is looking at the time between 2000 and 2018. So these are pre-pandemic numbers. There have been decreases as much as 35% along certain segments here in terms of number of vehicles passing through the community or along those segments. We did look at traffic volumes, and I'm not going to say that there's not traffic on these conditions. So one of the ways we measure that is looking at how long it takes you to kind of get through a segment at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then comparing that at 8 a.m., 1 p.m., and 4:30, kind of like peak volume times. And so, you can sort of travel on an average about 26 miles an hour on Lancaster Avenue and Conestoga Road in Radnor, or about 18 miles an hour through Radnor during a 3 a.m. period of time. That slows significantly during rush hour traffic. I think it is important to know, though, that on a sort of per mile basis, along Lancaster Avenue, for example, traffic's actually moving a little bit faster than it is in places like Ardmore. So this is just confirming something we all know, right? Traffic is bad during peak hours. One of the things that we pay a lot of attention to is safety. There's a lot of federal money out there right now to address safety issues. And so when we look at Radnor, we took all of the crashes over the past 5 years, and we built a heat map around that. Not surprising anybody, I think, that there's certain areas of the community that are really prone to having more crashes. However, we don't just care about fender bender crashes. We also really care about certain types of crashes that particularly involve pedestrians and bicyclists, because they're some of the most vulnerable users on the road. And so one of the things that you can see here is there is a concentration of pedestrian and bicycle crashes along Route 30. That's not a real surprise, in part because that's also where you have pedestrian infrastructure, and people are going to be walking where there are sidewalks, but it is something to be paying attention to. We also look at something called serious injuries and fatalities. These are life-changing events for people and communities, and one of the things that you can see is there is also a concentration of particularly fatalities along Route 30, including fatalities that have included a pedestrian. These are points of serious concern that are worth paying attention to as we continue to move through this comprehensive plan process. So this is really confirming the idea that there are significant safety issues on Radnor roads. There are a number of additional mobility topics that we address in the full presentation, including the sidewalk network, the trail network, transit service, parking, school accessibility. I'm not going to get into all of that right now. And in fact, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about the economic and business development environment, because there are a couple of issues that people think you should know, or we think you should know. In terms of Radnor, it's not a surprise that Radnor is very focused on education services, finance and insurance, professional, scientific, and technical services. One thing to really pay attention, I don't have to tell all of you, but it is worthwhile noting that these sort of business taxes, these Act 511 taxes, generate about 32% of township revenues. So this is an important issue to pay attention to, if not for the financial health of the community. So one thing to really know about your office condition in Radnor is that you've got a sizable office market, but it is also highly concentrated in a single property owner, which is Brandywine. They own about 65% of the land dedicated to office in the community, and they actually own about 71% of the value of the land of office dedicated. So not only are they a large landowner, but they disproportionately sort of are valued higher than their land, the land size in the community. And you can see their properties there in sort of the lighter of the two reds. So you may be asking, what is the condition of the office market in Radnor? We've heard a lot about work from home, and there's a lot of stories about the sort of downfall of the American office market. One thing to know is that the Radnor mainline submarket, which Radnor is in, is actually quite strong right now. Relative to the greater Philadelphia market, it's got lower vacancy rates, it's got a higher sort of per square foot asking price than the larger Philadelphia area. So for right now, my sort of first pass is to say that you are doing overall very well relative to your neighbors. There's a lot of reasons why that is that we can get into if you'd like, but it's something to sort of take note of. So this sort of busts the idea that the office market in Radnor is in bad shape right now. I will say that there's some things that are strengthening the office market right now. There's low unemployment in the greater Philadelphia area. There's been hiring in education and health services. I would say that there are some long-term risks that you should be paying attention to, including sort of rising vacancy rates in the region, continued consolidation of offices, and the fact that in one survey, basically 51% of Philadelphia employer surveys said that they would require their employees to return to work full-time. That was the lowest of all the regions that were surveyed. So it is something to just kind of pay attention to. The other thing to sort of note about Wayne, which is another one of your economic drivers here, is that a lot of people think of Wayne as a place of restaurants. It's a restaurants and retail, that's what it is. One thing to really pay attention to is there is a sizable number of professional, scientific, and sort of tech services, finance and insurance businesses that are located in Wayne. These may not be the bigger visible locations. They might not have a big sign out front. They may not be getting a lot of foot traffic, but there's a significant portion of the number of businesses that are actually they're operating in Wayne. So that sort of busts this idea that Wayne is just all about restaurants. We know there's some concerns that we talked about before about Wayne in terms of its economic and its infrastructure conditions. I won't get into those in more detail, only to say that you can see the full presentation at radnor2035.com, and that's going to go into environmental conditions, sustainability, resilience, open space and recreation, historic preservation, and schools. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A lot of information there.
A lot of information.
Given quite concisely. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
And I like that show, Mythbusters.
Good. Yeah, it's a good show.
I'm kind of a nerd too, so. All right. Next presentation, we are going to have from Practical Energy Solutions, a presentation of the Township Facilities Evaluation, Feasibility Study, and Energy Audit. Hi. Welcome.
Thank you for having us. Do I need to do anything from here or? Okay. So we're going to take a little bit more of a zoom in now to Radnor's facilities themselves.
If you could just bend the mic a little
Yeah.
bit toward you, I don't think it's picking up so. I can give you a handheld too if that's better. Here you go.
I did, yeah. Excitement mount. All right, looks like we're in business. So yeah, we're going to focus a little bit more on the Radnor Township facilities themselves. My name is Marika Selsler-Williams. I'm an energy engineer with Practical Energy Solutions. And this is in line with, let's see if we can get everything on here. In line with some of the commitments that Radnor Township has made, looking back to early 2019 with the commitment to Ready for 100, which is a commitment to 100% renewable electricity by 2035 and energy for heating and transportation by 2050 for the community as a whole, but with Radnor Township being an aspect of that community. This was adopted in a more formal report form in March 2021 in the Renewable Energy and Conservation Plan. And this is one of the tangible next steps from that plan to make strides towards more clean energy foundation for Radnor Township's facilities. So our scope was around energy analysis, how the facilities are using energy, how we can look to integrate renewable energy, a deep dive on the HVAC systems, as well as roof evaluation for the Radnor Activity Center, Township Building, and the Public Works facility. This is mostly just an eye chart, if I can get the key up here, if I can make this full, there we go. So this, an eye chart more than anything, but in the dotted lines are the energy end uses specifically for space heating and domestic hot water heating that are fueled by gas, which is not in line with the Ready for 100 goals as a non-renewable resource. Everything else is sourced from electricity through the utility, so with a limited renewables impact on there. Apologize for the pictures. Those seem not to have come through. But the crux of things is at the municipal building, it was built in 2008, and the vast majority of the equipment is at end of life. A lot of the heat pumps are already getting replaced. The roof is at end of life. The lighting and controls are outdated. Of the pictures here, we can see an outdated boiler, an incomplete BAS control system, and a roof that is in poor condition. So for that aspect of it, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, structural engineer Jeff Toms, who has some things to say about that.
Sure. Good evening, members of the board. So what we found in investigating the roof for the municipal building is that while it does have a good membrane, the joints are pretty much in bad shape. So the roof itself behaves as a 30-year roof, but the joints themselves do not. And so that said, we're recommending that it be replaced as part of this endeavor, which makes sense if we're talking about putting in solar panels. As part of that, we're looking at also removing and replacing or potentially completely moving the rooftop equipment so that we can maximize the solar array that we would put on this roof. In looking at the roof structure itself, we did find that it has capacity to put a ballasted solar array, which means a non-penetrating system that does not go through the roof membrane and cause you more problems for roof leaks in the future. So we're looking good that way. I'll turn it back over to Marika.
Thank you. Yeah, we go into a lot of detail in the report about various options and considerations associated with some of these improvements. But ultimately, in pursuit of those Ready for 100 goals, in energy conservation measures, energy equipment efficiency increases, you can supply about a third of your electricity consumption at the township building through a solar array on the roof. But a general recommendation that the roof condition is addressed first, certainly before any consideration of solar. So this is a very, very concise version of everything that we go into in the report, but broken out into building energy upgrades, including LED lighting throughout, improved controls that have currently been overridden, HVAC controls improvements and electrification in pursuit of those goals, and general plug load management and increase of the roof installation. The big ticket item here is that the HVAC system as a whole, being at end of life, we do make the recommendation to move towards a geothermal system, which is in concert with the existing distribution system, which is water-to-water heat pumps throughout the building. And it's about a similar commitment to a full overhaul of the distribution system. Also line itemed here are the solar for the rooftop, the main and the lower roofs, as well as the replacement of that roof. The Public Works facility has a very similar story. HVAC equipment is typically beyond end of life. A vast majority of the energy use is through gas at this time, firing those gas unit heaters hanging from the ceiling, and which does not meet the Ready for 100 clean energy goals. Lighting similarly needs to be upgraded, and controls to be integrated, and the roof is in poor condition.
I won't go into too much more detail on that. I believe that most everybody here knows the condition of the Public Works building. But maybe just to characterize it a little bit, walking around on that roof is sort of like walking on a bunch of pillows. And that's exactly what they call it. The roof is pillowing. The roofing insulation is buckling to the point where it's just kind of bowing throughout the roof. That said, needless to say, there's a number of roof leaks, and some of these were actually active when I was on site there coming into the building. So it's a clear recommendation for a roof replacement here as well. Given that there is some water leakage coming through, we would like to take a look at the roof structure once the roof is stripped off of there. We want to make sure that we've got a good eye on any potential damage that may have occurred. It's not to say that anything has happened at this point, but as a structural engineer, when you see things like this, you have to play it conservative. Beyond that, though, assuming that we have everything in tip-top shape, we're looking at a roof that has plenty of capacity to be able to support a ballasted solar array. Now, I also want to take note that there are 26 skylights on this roof. We want to get rid of all of them. They're a harbinger for leaks, and really not seeing a big benefit in having skylights. That's going to increase the amount of solar capacity that you can have on this roof, which, as Marika will get into, when you add this one to the office building, you're actually beyond what your power requirements are for the building.
Yeah, the north shed of the Public Works facility, once the roof has been addressed, is actually a great opportunity. I wish I had a picture on it, I apologize. Is a great opportunity for a solar array that can produce more power than the Public Works facility requires. And so that can be virtually net metered to other Radnor Township-owned facilities, municipal building, the RAC, others. Anything else with a Radnor Township PICO account. So once the roof is addressed, that will make significant strides towards those renewable energy goals. A summary here, again, on the building energy upgrades, very similar to the municipal building, but with a little less intensity needed for the HVAC. Similarly, LED lighting and electrification of HVAC systems can have major efficiency improvements. Maximizing the solar on the north shed as well as the Public Works office is recommended to really maximize some of those pretty open areas to go throughout the township. And again, the roof replacement is definitely of top priority. The Radnor Activity Center, our scope was more focused specifically on the energy consuming systems, but the roof there is also in poor condition and is impacting the integrity of the thermal envelope of the building and the humidity requirements indoors. Similarly, HVAC equipment is nearing end of life, not quite at end of life, but it is gas-fired and does not meet the clean energy goals. And there's great opportunity for the lighting in the gym area. Those are all outdated fixture types that can see actually huge savings by going to LED, and they take a lot less time to warm up. So again, focused here only on the building energy upgrades along the same lines of electrification, efficiency improvements. And all of this should be preceded by a improvement to the envelope of the building. A lot of numbers there, and all kind of the same story throughout the three buildings. But yeah, we are open to any questions that you may have at this time.
Anyone have questions? Commissioner Riley.
Sorry, yeah, for a question. For the Public Works facility, and you said it was, pillowy going across, which I believe you. Comparing to repair it to just replacing it from ground up, isn't it just like I-beams holding the thing up and above? Like, are you guys just repairing it, or are you replacing?
So when we use the word replacement, what I'm referring to is the black material, the underlying insulation, and then perhaps portions of the metal roof deck that support that roofing system. Below the roof deck is all roof structure. You're referring to I-beams. There's steel I-beams, there's open web bar joists. That steel structure would all remain. We would not be replacing any of that. I'd like to inspect it. I want to take a look at it because, again, anytime that you see water coming through and making contact with steel, as a structural engineer, I need to see that before I say, it's okay.
Yeah. And then how about, I think the tilt of the roof is heading north, not towards the south. Would you adjust the panels if you did solar on top?
It drains towards the middle at this time.
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, there's internal roof drains and what used to be what we call crickets to direct the water into those roof drains. That's of no major consideration for the solar array. A ballasted solar array uses pre-manufactured racks, if you will, okay, that are set at a particular angle that's maximized to collect solar energy, for our region. So roof slope is not, a factor in our consideration.
You just adjust it to the latitude or whatever.
Correct. Correct.
Any other questions? Commissioner Agnew.
So our roof, this roof, is a 30-year roof, but it's only been good for 15 years. Do you know why that is?
Unfortunately, yes. The reason
Well,
why.
it's good that you know. No,
Pardon?
It's
sorry?
bad news, I guess. It's good that you know, but it's bad news, I guess, of what it is.
So my observations from up there were, and we did have a photo. I'm going to screw that up. So
No.
that's it.
It's a bad, corrupted photo, but
No, actually,
it's the best looking one.
the bottom photo on the left.
On the left.
Yes, that is a picture of a roof seam. So the roof membrane is not just one big piece of rubber.
Mm-hmm.
It's multiple pieces that are seamed together. And I got to be honest, I'm not sure exactly what happened with these seams, but they're not working very well anymore. And so That's why I make the comment that while, the membrane itself, it's 90 hundredths of an inch thick, which is a thick membrane.
Okay.
That's why we give it a 30-year rating. Normal roofs are 60. Despite having a 90 mil roof membrane, the seams are in such bad shape that you can't expect it to last much longer. It's very unfortunate, to be honest.
Right, so what would be done so that this doesn't happen again? You have 3 seconds for your answer. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
What I would say to that is that we want to make sure that there's good oversight during construction. To me, it looks like something was not done right during construction. The lap seams were not what I normally would expect.
You would use seams again?
Yes, they are proven to be successful. It's just that even judging by looking at that photo, looking at that, I'm sort of in awe as to how they got away with doing it that way. You normally have overlapping pieces of rubber that are seamed with another piece of rubber. I don't see that there.
So there would be an inspection procedure that should be in place when it's done?
Yes.
Being done.
So what would be most ideal is to have, your engineer of record, have an inspection program through construction, do a punch list, and make sure, at the end of the day, when it's all done right, before contractor is released from the site, that everybody looks at it and says, yes, that's the way it was supposed to be done according to the manufacturer's recommendations.
And what about the other building? Not the rec center, the
Public Works.
Public Works building?
Same.
Why is that pillowing?
My assessment on that, it has more to do with vapor becoming trapped underneath of the insulation. And once it gets in there, it has a tendency to cause the underside of the insulation to warp and to buckle upwards. It's a strange phenomenon, to be honest with you, not something that is very well understood. But the way that I would get around that is design the roof to have a vapor barrier on top of the metal deck to make sure that any humidity that's trapped inside of the building doesn't come up and cause this warping to happen. It's a relatively, I'd say within the last 5 to 10 years, that newer buildings have been implementing this idea of using a vapor barrier so that moisture doesn't come from inside the building and try to make its way out and then get trapped underneath of that rubber roof membrane.
Knock wood?
I have one quick question, again, about roofing. Seems to be the topic of choice. If you buy a 30-year roof, does that mean somebody's guaranteeing it for 30 years? I mean, I'm not talking about even this specifically, but generally, what does that mean? Or are you just buying a quality that should be good for 30 years?
I'm going to go with the latter. I don't have very favorable opinions about warranties. I'm very sorry, so I can't lie. It's basically a grade of the product that you're buying. Yes, for 30 years, the manufacturer will warranty against defects, but it's all contingent upon how well it's installed. And probably the most important thing that you have to have happen is for that manufacturer, let's say that it's Carlisle, okay? You make darn sure that Carlisle comes out and does their warranty inspection so that you actually have their word that they're good with that 30-year warranty.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Very welcome.
Any other questions? Thanks so much, appreciate it.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on. This sets the stage for Mr. White to talk to us about facilities bonds and unfunded capital projects.
Thank you very much. While Ian switches over to, oh, there we go. It sounds like tying our two presentations in, if there's an economic development opportunity in Radnor Township, it would be for roofing companies to take over some of the vacant office space. The other thing I want to point out as we get started with this discussion is that if for those board members that have been with us for a few years, you'll notice, or you will have noticed, every time we have a project in front of you for approval, it includes not just the construction costs, but the inspection costs associated with that, along with the contingency. That's why the inspection costs are there, is we're paying professional inspectors at all of our job sites to make sure that the installation of that work is being done properly. That practice started in roughly, 2011 and 12 at least. And so the projects that have been installed since then have all been professionally inspected as they've been installed. So transitioning now to this quick presentation, this was put on tonight's agenda out of conversations with several board members over the last couple of months with regard to the reoccurrence of discussions about unfunded capital, as well as knowing that Practical Energy Solutions was going to be here tonight to present their summary findings, and the facilities bonds that the board authorized back in 2023 or 2022 that will provide the resources to make the improvements that were recommended tonight. So we wanted to kind of marry all that together. A couple things. The information that I'm going to step through tonight is an inventory of projects that have been accumulated over time through multiple sources, including staff evaluations of township assets, resident and Board of Commissioner requests for projects in various areas, as well as any other type of email or phone call that generates a look that ultimately turns into some sort of project. We have been including, one other quick note with that is that as an inventory of projects, what this information tonight lacks is any kind of prioritization or recommendation on the movement of these projects. Short of, and I'll get into this in a moment, depending on where a project might be at in its life cycle, obviously the closer we are to construction, the higher priority a project like that might have, because we've already invested some money in designing it and getting it ready to go. What we're looking at now on the screen is what's been included in the 2024 budget. We have been including these reports in the budgets. During our budget conversations, in light of all the other elements of the budget discussed, these have not been given a lot of time and discussion. We have them categorized as general capital unfunded, sanitary sewer unfunded, and stormwater partially funded. Because we do have some bonds out there installing projects as we speak, as well as plans for future projects. Over the last couple of months, staff has worked on consolidating this information into a single source spreadsheet that houses all of these projects. And I'm hoping that will go away, but if it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. So what we've got quickly is a quick chart that categorizes all the different projects. And I thought that this presentation was helpful just to understand or give a kind of a quick glimpse at the multitude of projects that our group is working on. And Steve has mentioned, or Mr. Norsini, the township engineer, has mentioned time and again, our project list rivals that of major cities. The number of projects and the scopes of all these different projects, ranging from our streets and structures, our facilities, parks, pedestrian safety, our sanitary sewer system, which we heard from the Business Advisory Committee at their last meeting. This number is obviously a lot higher. We won't know that until we actually get in the system and start taking a better look at it. Roughly half of this chart is investing into stormwater management, as well as our street lighting improvement project. That's part of the same energy improvement initiatives that were reported on earlier. We always have traffic and transportation improvements as well as trails. And these numbers, again, it's a massive amount. It's $84.5 million, include projects that have been completed, and we'll get into the breakdown here shortly. Projects that are completed, projects that are currently in construction, projects that are in various stages of design, and then kind of the catch-all of projects that are still in some sort of planning phase, which is mostly our unfunded list. So we take that same information and we take a look at it a little different way, and these are our funding sources that pay for these projects. Our capital fund, which is pretty much just general fund dollars. Those are annual tax dollars that get redirected by the board into a capital fund to be used for the installation of these projects. We have the facility bond that will be used for the improvements that were recommended tonight, as well as others that were part of that discussion. We have the one remaining 2016 project out of our 2016 bonds. That was Fenimore Woods. We have a handful of projects from our 2019 bonds. Our liquid fuels fund, which, as we heard from Mr. Wagner at the last meeting, this funds the township's annual road resurfacing program. Again, our sewer fund is in some state of infancy in its evaluation. Stormwater fund, and then we've got really three different pieces of this involved with stormwater. We have the stormwater fund projects that we're completing. We've either completed or will complete with cash over the years, as well as current stormwater bonds and those projects that are identified for the future. And then we have the unfunded piece. And this is just, again, this is the inventory of projects that have accumulated over time where the township just hasn't had any capital funding to address them. So they live in the spreadsheet absent a dedicated funding source to start addressing those. So when we get into the actual tables of what all of these projects are, there's a couple different presentations of this. We have the project categories, which was that first pie chart here, and the project life cycles here, from planning to design to construction to completed. When we were initially putting this together, we hadn't intended on doing a whole lot of presenting or conversation on completed projects, but when we saw the amount, we felt compelled to report that the township has done a lot of projects. So while we get stuck in these meetings and talking about unfunded capital, it's not for lack of getting work done. There's been a ton of work done throughout the township, and this really is only capturing the last couple of years of work. And again, when you take a look at the numbers, most of it is tied up in stormwater, as you would imagine, but we've also addressed traffic and transportation, the Radnor Tap Trail, building streets and structures, some pedestrian safety with some sidewalk improvements, as well as some park improvements as well. And mind you, this doesn't include most of the park projects that were completed with the 2016 bonds. So that number would be a lot higher. So while we're focusing on some of the unfunded pieces of this, there is a significant amount of work that has been completed over the last couple of years. And as we speak tonight, we have another $6 million in various stages of actual construction with shovels in the ground and work being done. And then a pretty significant amount of projects that are in various stages of design, which really means that those are projects where the board has authorized the township to engage in some sort of design element to get us final pricing and bid documents to move towards a construction. And then we ultimately have the planning, like I said earlier, which is a bit of the catch-all. So we take a look at that same information housed in the spreadsheet is all of the projects broken down by those same categories, and then we have a project name and then a brief description. I am not going to go through all of these. I will scroll down quickly just to get an understanding of the magnitude and the number of projects and line items that are being tracked, and it is pretty extensive. But when we take a quick look by category, we could see, for example, the parks category. We have all of the parks, sorry, I'm jumping around with my mouse here. All of the parks listed, along with some suggested improvements that are needed at each of those. And again, this is one of the things that's fantastic about Radnor is we have a lot of assets and a lot of parks, and those parks have fantastic amenities. But over the course of time, those amenities need to be updated and replaced as they reach the end of their useful lives. The good news is there's not a lot of roof jobs on this list. There is a few. I did see Fenimore there. There's a structure there that's being looked at. But this is where we're capturing all of the park projects and the work that is needed throughout the township in that area. We take a look at the stormwater management. I won't spend a lot of time here. These are projects that at this point are a lot of feasibility, a lot of flood reduction concepts that are just that. They're planning. They're not yet designed projects where we would be moving towards any kind of construction. That's the differentiation between stormwater management versus, say, stormwater infrastructure, where we've actually, there's some sort of piece of pipe or device in the ground that's either conveying, capturing, or doing something to help with the stormwater management in town. Facilities, I'll spend a quick second on this one. We just heard the report from Practical Energy Solutions. Incorporated in each of these project listings are the elements that were recommended tonight in terms of roof replacements, the installation of solar arrays, replacement or some sort of replacement of HVAC or those types of units to meet with the energy reduction plan for each of those three sites. Now, Sopizio has a few more additional line items given the envelope of the building itself. Public Works, we talked about the parking lot, which the replacement of that entire parking and driving surface area, which is needed, and I can attest you can barely walk from one building to the other without twisting an ankle on the asphalt in its current condition. So all of those project items are identified here. Various pedestrian safety projects. We have crosswalks in various areas of the town that have been designed and are just awaiting some sort of funding to move forward with the installation. All that said, I will try to quickly just pull out and take a quick look at the unfunded piece to get a sense of that portion of it. So we can quickly report on what we have currently identified as unfunded. So these are projects that we've had conversations on. They're assets that need replacing, but there isn't currently any funding in place to move forward with any kind of action on these. Again, going back to where I started, the intention tonight was just to kind of go through the inventory to provide some context on where we're at in developing these projects. What we're missing from a process standpoint is some sort of structured way that a project becomes a capital project. And it's one of the things internally that we struggle with in maintaining a list like this is, a request comes in for make up an intersection, a new traffic light or a new traffic light signal at an intersection. As things currently exist, that immediately becomes a project that someone's looking into. And sometimes the projects themselves they're not vetted in a thoughtful way. They just end up on this spreadsheet, and then next thing you know, you have an $84 million spreadsheet looking back at you. So hopefully over the course of time, the hope is that we're able to develop some sort of process in identifying capital projects moving forward, and that may lend itself towards developing some sort of funding plan Again, not something that we're going to solve in 2024, but over the course of time, hopefully we're able to develop the process that these projects are categorized or identified in, and then a funding plan to address them through some combination of cash and borrowing and a lot of different mechanisms that are available to us. Grants, partnerships with other entities, the whole gamut. So that's really the ground I wanted to cover tonight. Again, I appreciate you giving me a couple minutes to kind of give this high level presentation of this information. This is actually the spreadsheet. Instead of putting it in a presentation, just decided to present the spreadsheet as it exists today. Happy to go through. This is some of the guts that are behind those numbers that we just looked at, which again is a ton of information. I would like to conclude by recognizing engineering, which I say engineering like it's a lot of people. It's Steve, and then he gets help from Dennis and Ben, Tammy, and the Parks and Rec team for always being on top of what's needed in our parks and our trails and our outdoor assets. And then Bob and Amy in finance. Bob is the author or the architect of this spreadsheet. And as you can see by the information that goes into it and kind of the way that this information gets pulled together, it's a tremendous amount of work and difficulty trying to stay on top of it. And I'm guessing in 2 weeks from now, there'll be significant amendments that are needed to this just based on conversations that'll happen between now and then. But that's where these projects are at. Again, the hope is going forward, we have some sense of awareness of what these are that helps start taking some steps towards refining a capital improvement program.
Thank you. Again, a lot of information. I'm a little stunned and a little nauseous, but
One thing I forgot to mention, I just looked at my notes, and I wanted to talk about this. When we're talking about the project life cycle in these numbers, because I remember when I was sitting in the finance seat, the hyperbole of the numbers was almost unrealistic. It's like, why even have the conversation? But it's important to recognize that from planning through design, permitting, construction, and ultimately completion, you can kind of picture it as a funnel. You know, when we're talking about trying to find the price of a project that's in its planning phase, the numbers are pretty abstract. They are best guesses based on other projects, other types of information that we have available to us. Every single one of them includes the construction, inspection, and contingency. But as that project moves through its life cycle, those numbers, the accuracy of the numbers will narrow down. And we'll get really specific numbers at bidding. Not always smaller numbers, but very specific numbers at bidding. So just as we look at them, understand that the biggest portion of this presentation were projects in planning phases. So those numbers are very, the accuracy of those numbers are is pretty broad. So thanks for mentioning that they were nauseous, because I had the same feeling, but I also don't want us to get hung up on the numbers more than the projects themselves.
well, and I think you are good at prioritizing issues that are safety centered. A lot of the Parks and Rec work that's done, I know, is safety oriented, and that's of utmost importance. And it sounds as if some of our roof structures are about to be a safety issue. So if not already, I know Sulpizio, there are mold concerns, there, a lot of things we have to work on. So thank you very much for the overview.
Yep, thanks for the time.
I'll get over the nausea. Any commissioner comments, questions? And of course, you presented right before public participation, so I'm sure we'll open up a lot of questions there.
I have just one.
Oh, you do? I'm sorry, Mark.
That's okay. So, Bill, I guess I would be interested in, I know that this was to give a high-level overview and really kind of level set everybody on all of the things that we could accomplish if money wasn't an option, an obstacle. What would next steps from here be to get this into an actionable, prioritized list? What do you envision we could do as board members to work with staff, maybe some community input? What does that look like for you?
I'll start with the most pressing projects and work backwards. So many of the projects that are living inside this pie chart are either under construction or they're part of significant planning where we're actually putting together design costs like the facilities. So all of those projects are on a track and moving in the right direction. So when we get to the planning portion of this presentation and the true unfunded projects, I'll go back to the needing to develop a capital replacement program that starts with an agreed upon process by which we identify projects, and then that lends itself to how those projects get evaluated, prioritized, which then lends itself to how we're going to fund them. Because money is, we couldn't do all the, if we had 84 million, it would take us 10 years to get all these projects done anyway. But putting that type of process in place, I think is going to help everybody prioritize, what rises to the top in terms of what should go first and what we can wait on.
All right, I'd like to invite public participation. Anyone who would like to speak can speak for 5 minutes on any issue you like. If it's on the agenda later, unless you're like very last, which I see a whole crowd of people that are pretty close to last, you might want to speak now, but you could wait until that time as well. So. Can you start by stating your name and your address?
Yes. Bob Mikolas, West Wayne Avenue, Wayne. I represent the Radnor Youth Basketball Group. I have handed out a fact sheet for you, so I don't have to go through all the details. As it says there, we've been around for 35 years. We've been using what's now the RAC, Sulpizio Gymnasium, and for all 35 years. So we've been using it when it was part of the Radnor Middle School. So we're very concerned about the condition. We've been concerned about it over the years as it went through the retrofitting to make it usable as a community center. I served on committees under the township and also made presentations to the board about building a community center that was much more modern and usable and flexible. And several efforts were tried, but the cost figures and the locations just wouldn't work out. So we have the Radnor Activity Center. It's very valuable. It's, as I show in my sheet, we serve about 1,300 youth every year during the winter months. We now have groups interested in beyond just the winter months of using it for basketball. And there are other groups, adult groups that play pickleball, and other groups it's getting more popular and more used. And it's getting in worse and worse condition. So we had one day where it was shut down. I spent probably 30 hours trying to find alternative space for games, for things that were already in progress and might have to be canceled in the middle of the season. So we're very much I want to encourage consideration for giving it a priority. It will deteriorate. It will continue to deteriorate rapidly under its current condition. And I'm not a structural engineer, but Tammy got somebody to come look at it, and it was good to operate under certain conditions, but I'm afraid that's not going to last very long. So we're very much encouraged to see this facility be made at least into a usable facility. We use it now. Many people enjoy it now, but there are times when we have to put pails out to catch the water coming through the roof. So we're very, very interested in participating. If there's any things, any trade-offs have to be made, or we have some limited funding, we could help fund some things, but not at the kind of numbers that we've been seeing for roof replacement. I think there's something like 10 to 15 years left under the lease with the school district. And so that's about the age, the end of life for some of these roof structures. So building a new facility is not the answer unless there's a lot of money behind it. It's coming from some other source. Anyway, that's the information I'd like to give and like to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as you see, it'll be on the agenda later this evening. So anyone else from the public like to speak?
Hi, Robin Mann, 266 Beechwood Drive in Rosemont. I'm a member of the Green Team, or work with the Green Team, and I just wanted to express my appreciation for the commissioners funding the study that you've just received, and there's some very exciting elements of it. I know all the costs are very high, but one thing I wanted to just underscore is the opportunities to take advantage of the federal as well as the state funding assistance for those projects. And a little bit to suggest that you just keep in mind that, you know, if you don't go with some of those building electrification opportunities and the solar, you know, of course, those sources of offsets on the cost would not be available. So just it's a very significant number, and it's pretty exciting to think that Radnor could take advantage. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public participation? Seeing none, we'll move on. We're on the consent agenda now. Hold on one sec. Is there any item on the consent agenda that a commissioner would like to pull? Seeing none, is there any public participation about items on the consent agenda? Could I have a motion to accept and a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Moving on to the business agenda. Item A is Resolution 2024-47, authorizing the execution of a grant application to the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, the DVRPC, as Mr. Texa was telling us about earlier, Commission's Transportation and Community Development Initiative for a planning grant for the development of a downtown Wayne master plan in an amount not to exceed $100,000. Mr. White?
Thank you. Commissioners, we're looking to get your authorization to submit this grant application as identified in this title. Where this came from was Adam had presented a couple meetings ago the results of the public input survey portion of our comp plan, and there's a significant emphasis put on Wayne, and it's both positive and negative, but the importance of the Wayne area. And rather than waiting until the comp plan is complete, we have an opportunity to apply for grant funding that exists now for a master plan that would look to address a lot of those concerns that were raised during the public survey portion of the comp plan process. So what we're looking for tonight is authorization to submit this grant approval. It includes a request of $100,000, which I believe is the maximum amount that you can ask for under this grant program. We included an additional $90,000 township, so the total amount of the master plan would be $190 to develop this plan out of for Wayne. So that's what we're looking for tonight. If there's any specific questions, hopefully, Adam, you can help fill in some blanks if I missed anything material.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion for this resolution? Second? Okay. Any commissioner comment, questions? Any
Yeah,
pub? oh,
I'd
go
just like to say, I appreciate the willingness to partner on this with our consultant at FHI, and definitely have my vote.
One more note, Madam President, if I could, just to give credit to we have several members of the Planning Commission reach out to us advocating for this grant as well. A couple of members of which are helping us in review the application. So we'd like to thank and recognize those folks too.
Thank you, that's terrific. All right, let's vote on Resolution 2024-47. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Item B is a motion to approve the Climate Mayor's Letter of Support for the proposed EPA greenhouse gas emissions standards for heavy-duty vehicles. This is a proposition put forward by our EAC. Could I have a motion? And a second. All right. Presenting on this, Mr. Burnham? Yeah.
Daniel Burnham of North Bellevue Avenue in Wayne. I'm a member of the EAC and also the Green Team. I became aware of this letter through my friends at the Sierra Club about 3 months ago. And this letter, if anyone's aware of it, really is a letter to POTUS, to the President of the United States, demonstrating our support as a township for the initiative to tighten further the emission standards for heavy vehicles, particularly tractor trailers. Now, the diesel engines that power these machines are highly efficient and powerful. They are really a scientific achievement. However, they are polluting. They produce a lot of nitrogen oxides, which, due to the high compression temperature, is a product of nitrogen reacting with oxygen. Nitrogen oxides then go on to produce ozone and fine particulate matter. And if anybody has looked at their pollution monitor on AccuWeather or whatever, you will notice that fine particulate matter and nitrogen oxides are the lead causes on a daily basis of air pollution in our area. And if you sit outside your home in Wayne, 2 miles from the Blue Route, what you will hear is the sound from the Blue Route. And that sound, by and large, is these diesel engines hauling freight across this country. So we have noise pollution and air pollution, and nitrogen oxides and ozone are serious threats to our health, particularly for people living near major roadways. So this letter is requesting or stating support of the EPA proposal to tighten the emission standards for existing diesel vehicles and to encourage the transition over to electric vehicles for heavy-duty transport. And right at home, I know this township or neighboring townships are considering transferring their school buses to electric vehicles. Our children are sitting in diesel vehicles, smelling, inhaling nitrogen oxides and ozone every day. That is really the motivation for our Green Team and EAC submission of this letter for your approval.
Thank you very much. I hope everybody had a chance to read the letter. Any commissioner questions or comments? I know that I would be happy to sign it. Never written the President of the United States before, but happy to, especially about this. And I think one thing, another side benefit of going electric is the noise pollution as well. So it's not just breathing, but it's the aesthetics of life. So any public comment on this one? All right, I have a motion and a second. Let's call a vote. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank the other members of the EAC as well. Item C is a caucus on preliminary final minor land development plan for 739 Darby Paoli Road, a lot line change to remove the property line between two lots. Excellent. We were looking for you at the last meeting, so happy to see you.
Hi, good evening. We were not aware or notified, that's why we were not here, so apologies.
Not an issue. We tabled it for you, and here you are.
Hi, I have with me tonight Joe Gracie, Franklin Engineering. I'm Heather Gill. This is the property owner, John Sudillo, and we are here to seek approval for an amended lot line plan. John owns both parcels. One parcel is approximately 7.71 acres. The smaller parcel is approximately, let's see if I get this all in here, 1.44 acres. The smaller parcel is landlocked, which is just not an ideal situation to have. We're looking to adjust the common property line between the two properties to eliminate the landlocked parcel. We're not proposing any land development. We're not removing anything. We're not constructing anything. We received a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and we're here to seek your approval tonight.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any commissioner questions or comments?
Are you the property owner of both parcels? You are.
Yes.
So currently, is there any structures on either of the lots? Do you have a house?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. You can see the home is here. And the way it was divided originally is this pizza slice, which is landlocked. So we're just basically enlarging it to give access to the Colony Road here. So existing second property, totally vacant, nothing there. This is actually Overbrook Golf Course right here. So this pizza wedge is landlocked. Colony Road is here. So just sort of cleaning it up so that you know, this property is not landlocked anymore. So it'll have access to a road. But
And what's on the smaller lot? Is just yard, or how do you?
just
use
yard,
that?
yeah, just open space, yeah.
So you indeed are not trying to eliminate the line, you want to move the line.
Correct.
That's correct, yeah. And we're not proposing any development or anything. We're just moving the line to something that makes a bit more sense.
So what's the motivation for, if you're not developing it, to move the line right now?
Just to clean it up. I mean, to have a property, and I am paying property taxes on it. I have a lot that doesn't have access to a road is sort of silly. So to basically just, you know, make it a functional piece of property.
I guess I'm a little confused about this entire, I just lost the entire shape that you're showing us is owned by you.
Yes.
It's currently used with one house on it. It just has you have two lots, but you
Correct.
use it as one house, one property. So what are you landlocked from?
There's no access. If down the road, 10 years or 20 years from now, if this were ever sold, you couldn't build a house. It's landlocked.
It's landlocked to Colony Road. This is Colony Road here. You can't see it as go off, but this doesn't touch a road. So this pizza wedge doesn't touch a road. So it's landlocked from a road. Doesn't have road access, is another way to say it.
Are you planning on putting access to that road from your property?
No, I'm not going to do anything to it imminently.
We're not proposing any land development.
Or a road, I'm not going to put a road development or anything like that, no.
So why not leave it as one big parcel? Get rid of the property
But
line.
it's not. It's two parcels
I
currently.
know, but why not? So it was presented to us as eliminating the lot line between the two lots, which would make it one parcel, not two parcels.
It's moving, so this is the current lot line where my hand is.
No, I understand, it's
And
just
then we're
not,
going to move it down to here so it touches a road. So it's two parcels like this, and then we're just going to shift it like that.
And it does say amended
touches-
property line,
yeah, so
right here. It falls under the subdivision category for the ordinance, but it's just an amended an amended property line.
Yeah, we're moving it so it's not sort of a stranded property.
All right. Any other commissioner? Any public?
Yeah, sorry, I have a
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
or something. Mr. Norsini, what do you think of this?
This is a very minor, that's why they're here. This is a good candidate for the preliminary final. It is minor land development. He is just expanding a lot. It will be a buildable lot. It will be a lot that has access for if and whenever he wishes to do. We have no issues or concerns. If the lot ever does get built, they'll go through the grading permit process and the building permit process.
I have it now. It was just the way it was phrased in the title that was presented to us. It's actually
It's sort of an odd
my
thing,
misunderstanding. But you answered it perfectly when you said you wanted to move the line, not eliminate the line. So this is a caucus. Any public comment? All right. Oh.
Hi, Laura Luker, Ward 4, and I go by your property all the time. It's beautiful. It's the old Godfrey property, and it has an amazing water feature that goes through there. It would be a shame if it ever got developed. It'd be a great idea to put a conservation easement on that, and the Radnor Conservancy can give you names of great conservation trusts that do that. It would be a real shame to have a house put into that new piece of property. So it's just a suggestion.
But
It is really the most beautiful piece of property on Darby Paoli Road right there.
Yeah, and I just got to put a lot of time to sort of.
I know, I've watched.
God forgot it, it was kind of overgrown, so I spent a lot of time through
Yep.
the years sort of getting
Yep.
it back. So I agree with you 1,000%. The intention not to develop
Yeah,
it.
because you wouldn't want to be here looking at a house there. Okay.
I agree with your comments 100%.
Okay.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We'll see you again. All right, item
quick-
D.
Quick question, there's not a vote?
No, this is just a caucus tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'd suggest connecting with Mr. Norsini, and he'll get you scheduled for another meeting.
We'll have you for the next meeting on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Caucus, item D is a preliminary final land development plan for 579 East Lancaster Avenue, the Radnor Hotel, for removal of impervious surface and construction of a new venue structure. Welcome.
Excuse me. Good evening. Thank you for having me. What'd I do? Sorry. I hit the power button. Because then the pictures came up out of order. So I was trying to exit and go back into it. There we go, now they're in order. Yep. Sorry about that, good evening.
Hello.
My name is Joe Birch. I work for SW Bages Limited. We're an operating company here in the Radnor area. We own and manage many properties throughout the township and have been operating the Radnor Hotel since 1990. We're looking to do some enhancements to the outside garden area, and that's what this application was for. Coming up is a map of the area. There we go. Right in the center here is the Radnor Hotel. It's a U-shaped structure, which is open out to the back to the Radnor Financial Center. This is where they have a couple restaurants, and then the mainline health building is behind it. We're kind of bordered primarily by Lancaster Avenue to the south and Radnor Chester Road to the east. To the west is the 555 building. Across the street is St. David's Square and the Micro Center building. Then there's this office building on the corner of Radnor Chester and Lancaster, and the high school to the east. We are primarily a standalone property in every sense of the word. All our functions, there's enough parking on site. We don't rely on the township or other parking lots in order to meet all the needs of the property. We are a big proponent in shared parking. That's why you see so many different uses on this property, that we can kind of share the parking and everything can function well at this location. This is the elevation of the hotel from Lancaster Avenue. I didn't get the entrance, but you can kind of see it's the front and what we call the 595 building to the right. You won't see anything that we're proposing from this elevation, nor the elevation from the west. This is like looking from the 555 building. The 555 building, the tall building to the west. From the north, you're looking at the area that is the formal gardens behind these pine trees. That's where we're proposing to do some work back there. And if you step back a little further onto the Radnor Financial, you'll see, you still don't see anything that you'll eventually see that we're proposing. Then from Radnor Chester Road, you see these pine trees between the 595 building and the Vibe was the bank building. That's the area work back there. And even as you would drive onto our property from the main drive to the Radnor Financial Center, you turn onto the Radnor Hotel. You can see the 555 building in the distance. The top floor of the hotel here, but pretty much what we're proposing is kind of hidden behind all these pine trees, that most of them should remain after we're done, and then we'll infill some others. Today, people want something unique for their events. Everyone's looking for an experience. For the past few years, for the past year plus, we've been working with Fearless Restaurants for them to take over the food and beverage operations at the Radnor Hotel. You've probably seen one of the press releases in the news. So that's what we've been working towards. We've been fortunate. We've worked with them at the Wayne Hotel, where they developed Rosalie, I think, into a very nice venue there. And we think they can do a similar job for us here at the Radnor Hotel. These are just some pictures over the years of different functions that we've had in this garden area. This is the primary garden. If you've ever been there, there is a pool area in the back that's being added to this. But we've had different receptions out the back. Here's probably another cocktail reception. This was probably some business meeting in the summer where we had to set up some tents. And we've had many wedding functions there. And from there, they would kind of go into the cocktail area you see. But we've kind of been using these for our own events for the years. But we think that working with Fearless and going through this process, we can make something better that everyone will be proud of. And there's another picture on one of the balconies. This is kind of an overview of what we're proposing to do to make the changes. This closest structure, this is where the balcony is, where you'd walk out from the hotel down the steps. This first structure here initially was like a conservatory, but it's kind of grown more to an arbor or a pergola. This is kind of a sketch of it. It's a little different. The roof actually retracts about 2/3 of it. The lower walls kind of slide together. I don't want to say an accordion, but they can open up, but when necessary, they can close up. And it was interesting, I found something similar. It doesn't have the walls, but if you've ever been to La Scala's, in front of it, they have this structure. You can see here, and you can kind of see how this roof would open up, and those actually kind of accordion together, so maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of the roof is actually open, so you lose a quarter from the structure sitting there. So this is one of the structures. This is where, you know, you might have your wedding ceremony here, provided it's not too inclement of weather. It's not an insulated roof. It's probably at best a 6-month, maybe a few more months, but not a year-round type of facility to be used. Going back, this is kind of similar to our other, this is kind of a courtyard with a fireplace. This would be a outside bar area. Right now, what we have to do is we're lugging bars out, tubs, ice, water, back and forth for any outside function. At least this would give us a permanent location to store stuff, have it there, and not transporting it back and forth. And then in the back here is a tent where you could have a reception. Again, looking for something unique and different. It's actually a sailcloth tent. It's a little bit different. This is a night picture. You can kind of see it has a little more light filtration to it, a different feel. This is from the inside. You have wooden posts that would support the structure and around the outside. Just a little bit more of a unique experience than, say, this type of tent that we've kind of become familiar with since COVID. And when you're inside of it, it's a little bit dark. It's not as warm and inviting. Again, this would be a temporary structure, though, only for a few months of the year. But I think it would give a different feel for having your wedding or a function at that point. And last, there is a small addition to the back building. This is more for storage and kind of event staging. As you're having your function here in the tent, they may store different items and kind of use it as a staging area before they're bringing stuff out to you during your function under the tent. So that's really what we're looking to add at this point. Oh, that's kind of, I think I skipped ahead one, but all these functions are weather dependent. In the event of bad or severe weather, these outside facilities probably won't be used. It'll always have to be dependent on the weather, and the banquet space that's along here would be held in reserve in the event of an emergency or, you know, thunderstorms or bad weather. Everyone wants to have their wedding on a perfect day and sunny, bright, but it rains on a few of them. So while we hope everyone gets to enjoy this, we know there won't be a few, but since this is really being held in reserve, the parking calc was only really put on this arbor structure, and that's on the plan. We've had many developments over the years, so we do have additional parking on site of about 34 parking spaces, and 5 are being allocated to this. So we still have additional parking, but we kind of have everything that we need spelled out in the plan. Overall, I think this will be a great addition and an asset that the community will come to like. And I kind of had this picture to give you a reminder. We haven't been to these boards in quite some time. SW Bages has been working in this area since the early 80s with the renovation of the Wayne Hotel. We've kind of worked on the 2 main corners of Lancaster Avenue and South Wayne Avenue with the bank building, and once it was the Gap, now it's Blue Mercury. and other big projects like Rosemont Business Campus and the Kingsway. So I hope you see that we've been in this community for quite some time. We're looking to do something good, and I think this will be a great asset added to this area.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I'm sure others do too. But the tent.
Yep.
How tall is it?
26 feet.
Oh, that's not so tall. And would it come down in the winter?
Yes.
Totally. So
Yes.
presumably even before hurricane season, I suppose. But
I would say very close to that.
Yeah, late September or something like that.
And even with the tent, it's rather expensive, and it's recommended that there's actually a maintenance contract with it, where the company comes out, they recheck the straps that hold down the tent, make sure it's securely in place, things like that. So that's probably every six weeks to 2 months, but at least someone is checking on it. It's not a staff person who's not familiar with the structure.
Yeah, it could, if it blew away, it could do some damage. Yeah.
The good thing is it is within the structure of the hotel. You know, there are trees. The building kind of protects that back area, but I would still be a little worried about a strong wind.
Other commissioner comments, questions?
I have a couple. Would you consider something more permanent than a tent? So we have lived through COVID and tents in places that they perhaps, you know, they were there for an emergency situation, but tents get dirty, tents get kind of, I think, damaged. So would you consider a more permanent structure so that we don't have tents all over town?
It's probably a couple-part answer. The hope would be that with the maintenance contract, they would clean it, it would stay fresh-looking. It's not inexpensive, so I think it's worthwhile to do that. But also the tent's a temporary structure that doesn't factor into my building coverage. So where it's a temporary, if I put a permanent structure like that, it would have to recalc the whole land development aspect of it. So at this point, no, that's why we kind of added the one arbor as a permanent structure. And this is kind of a feel of a different garden outside, European type of thing. So I think it kind of goes with the feel of the entire presentation.
Okay. And do you expect that this space is used other than just events? So, you know, somebody who's grabbing dinner, would they be serving drinks out there? Would hotel guests be using that space during their stay? Or is it just for your large events?
The tent would primarily be large events. I don't think they would want anyone walking around that unsupervised like that. If it was a nice warm day, there wasn't anything, I'm sure people would sit out in the courtyard, but I wouldn't see it as a actively engaged area.
Okay, thank you.
Other commissioner comments or questions? Okay, so this is just a caucus, no vote for you tonight, sorry.
Thank you.
All right, where am I? I'm on the next page. Items E and F on the agenda are somewhat related, so I'm going to read both of them because I know Tammy's probably going to speak to both of them, but we'll have to get a separate motion, second, and a vote. So item E is Resolution 2024-49, authorizing Heckendorn Shiles Architects, HSA, to provide professional architectural and engineering review, conditions, assessment, and master planning for renovations for the Radnor Activity Center at Sulpizio Gymnasium in the amount of $32,075 to be funded from the facilities bond. Could I have a motion? So moved. And a second? All right. Tammy's going to speak to both, so we're going to go to item F, Resolution 2024-51, authorizing RT Environmental Services Incorporated to provide a professional hazardous materials survey for the renovations at the Radnor Activity Center at Sulpizio Gymnasium in the amount of $11,915 to be funded from the facilities bond. May I have a motion? And a second. All right. Director Cohen.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that. Both of those introductions together, those are a mouthful. So I want to take an opportunity just to highlight Radnor Activity Center at Sulpizio Gym for a couple of minutes, just to accentuate and echo a lot of things that have been stated earlier in terms of the usage, particularly by the Radnor Youth Basketball Group, who I know is here with us tonight, and numerous other groups that utilize the facility on basically on an annual basis. Radnor Soccer Club is in there. We have pickleball every day now. We have men's basketball. We have women's basketball we've done over the years. We have men's soccer, indoor soccer. Lots of things that are going on. Lots of great community events. In fact, in 2011, we actually hosted then Vice President Joe Biden was actually at the facility, believe it or not. So this is a great space. It's a true community asset. As everybody is aware, there's definitely some improvements that need to be made at the facility that are significant. And as we heard earlier, in keeping with the theme of the roofing systems, there are significant roofing failures that are happening at that facility that need to be addressed, and overall building envelope and structural analysis. So in addition to the roof structures that are beyond, generations beyond their lifeline, we also know that there's a significant amount of masonry breakdown on the perimeter of the building. We've had various inspections and reports over the years. And if we award tonight to HSA, they're going to take into consideration all of those pieces of information and sources of information in addition to what Practical Energy Solutions presented to us earlier. The HVAC has reached its lifeline. We know there's 4 giant units that sit on top of the building that need to be reconsidered for more efficiency. And looking at that is one of the things that they're going to look closely at, taking a look, can we put those on the ground? Can we be creative? And obviously look into Practical Energy Solutions suggestions in terms of moving away from the gas-powered HVAC that's there at that facility. We know we have failures around the windows. We have a significant amount of water intrusion that has disrupted the interior cosmetic of many of the spaces, not only on the public usable space inside the gym, but in some of the ancillary areas, especially upstairs on the 2nd floor. Even though those spaces aren't used by the public on an ongoing basis, they are severely disrupted. So all of those are going to be looked at. We're going to take a look at the hazardous materials as the second resolution goes into details there. We're going to look at asbestos. We're going to look at lead paint. We're going to look at all kinds of materials like mold and airborne and surface particles, so we have a full understanding of the facility. In addition, a lot of the recreational equipment is going to be looked at. There's mechanical arms that raise and lower the baskets that are inside the facility that have been there for 40-plus years. I think we do a good job of maintaining them, but at some point they're going to break down and fail also, so we're going to take a close look at those. So a lot of the usable recreational functional spaces. And then, of course, the building technology. When we look at things like lighting, switching to LED lights, obviously things that don't require 15 minutes to light up and power down and things like that, those that can be controlled remotely. So looking at the overall technology, the building surveillance that we currently have. We don't operate directly. The Park and Rec Department does not directly operate at the site. So there's a lot of things that we have to be able to do remotely from our computers, our phones, and things like that that make it easy and more efficient. So there's a lot of studies and a lot of materials that have been generated over the last decade plus. HSA is going to look at all of those things. They're going to do some new reworking and new studies, take a much closer look. I know RT Environmental is actually going to fly a drone around the building to do in-depth pictures and imaging to try and understand the depth of the breakdown of the joints that exist all over the bricks and mortar. We know that that's significant. It's also significant on the roof because there are parapet walls that are comprised of bricks that are just completely broken down. So, and water's traveling all through those spaces. So this is a comprehensive look. It's going to be a full assessment that's going to give us an idea of a magnitude of what it's going to cost to do all of those things. So I know there were some numbers that Bill had put up on the screen earlier. I don't want folks to get hung up on those. A lot of times those become placeholders, and as he had described, you know, we kind of start like with a funnel, and we look at this, and we start to really drill into what it's going to cost. So essentially, when HSA completes their work, we're going to have a better understanding of all of these different parts and pieces, what they're going to cost, a menu of sorts that we're going to look at, obviously tying in practical energy solutions, the Ready 100 goals, and all of those things into this to try to achieve those types of improvements as well. So I just want to make the distinction, like we're not buying improvements tonight. We're just buying a look at what we have to do, you know, to get to that point. We would have to come back subsequently to have, you know, whether it's HSA or a different firm to come back and actually redevelop a bid package, construction administration, all that. That would have to happen at a future meeting and at an additional proposal and cost. So this is a small investment overall to really see what the magnitude is of what the building is going to cost and can cost. I know they're going to look at it with a cost estimator that does this every day, has a really good idea, you know, of what comes back in terms of municipal bidding processes, and will certainly help us. And then just to speak to HSA, I know they've done a lot of municipal work. So we conducted an RFP process back in June that was carried along for several months. And they were chosen. They're located just over the line in Tredyffrin, not Radnor, but they're close enough. They don't have far to travel to come down and work with us on this project. So we're excited about the work that they've done, not only in indoor recreation, but in outdoor recreation, and think that they can definitely complement some of the studies that have been done and offer their own unique assessment to what is there. So with that, I just want to, you know, respectfully ask the board for approval. Again, thank you to all the groups that are here tonight and everybody who's, I know, been interested in this program or interested in this project and getting this building back up and running in a safe manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you have to start somewhere, and I think starting by assessing and figuring out what needs to be done is the way to go. Any commissioner questions or comments? I mean, I think we've all been in the building and realize it needs some TLC. So, any public comment? No? Let's take item E, Resolution 2024-49. Can I have a vote? All in favor? Passes unanimously. Item F, Resolution 2024-51. Could I have a vote? All in favor? Aye. Unanimous again. That ends our business agenda for this evening. We just have a few other items to take care of. We're going to move on to reports of board liaisons. I have a little organizational issue to discuss at first. We have a new role that's being adopted with 2 liaisons from the Board of Commissioners to the Fire Department. And Commissioner Mulrooney and Commissioner Larkin have nicely put their hand in the air and volunteered to do that. That being said, Commissioner Mulrooney, who is currently on the EAC, would like to step down from that, and Commissioner Agnew has said she would love to do that. So just some organizational stuff. You'd love to. You better love to. No, I have one report as a board liaison to the Board of Health. I just wanted to warn everyone that there was a report at last week's Board of Health meeting of lots of infections going around. People know there's a lot of COVID going around. There's still some influenza A going around, but in the township there were 2 cases of pertussis. Pertussis is whooping cough. near and dear to my heart as a pediatrician, or not dear to my heart as a pediatrician. Generally is not much to worry about in older children and adults, but if you know anyone that's pregnant or about to have a newborn baby, you should get immunized for pertussis if you're going to be around that baby. There's my pediatrics pearl for the day. Any other reports from board liaisons? Seeing none, any new business? Old business? Final public participation? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Second. We're adjourned.